Rory McIlroy golf has been out for over a week, so no better time than now to bring in our resident golf expert, Polygon's Mr. Owen Good, to join us for a conversation about Rory McIlroy PGA Tour golf. Owen, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for having me on.
So let's just start, before we get into sort of what the current situation is with Rory McIlroy. Owen, just give me, we haven't had a chance to talk to you about Rory McIlroy golf. What are your, what's your overall thought on Rory McIlroy now that you've had it in your hands for about a week?
Well, my overall thought is they have a gameplay engine that makes some needed changes. They're somewhat subtle, but it is a clean and smooth playing game of golf. I do enjoy it when I am thinking about the shot that I'm making, and I try to play it at a more advanced level with the assist turn off and things like that. I think at the lower levels it can be a little too easy to just dial in the coordinates, which is a problem that this game has had through the years. But at higher levels, there is some thought that has to go into it. I think the thing that I like most about the gameplay is the putting, which has in years past really suffered from a difficulty spike, which is either it babies you, it gives you the putt preview, or it gives you a putt preview that fades, or a putt preview window that's permanent, or you're just completely on your own, and only through like a lot of play and trial and error do you figure out how far behind the hole you need to hit it, what your break is, that sort of thing. Now I like the ideal break line that sort of gives you a starting point, and that's all I've ever really asked for with this game. I think Tiger Woods 12 had a sort of a starting point mechanism, which is like focus, and then it gave you a circle, and you were going to put it somewhere in there, and then you sort of figured out how to hit it from there. I like the break line, is what I mean to say, and it's not always like figure out where on the grid and then move it to the steepest part of the break. If you've got like a hill that's between you and the cup, you have to factor into the speed that gets you over that hill, and then how am I break off of that. It still leaves an element of determination into that, and I think that that's probably where the game shines the most. Is it makes your second shot so much more important to be accurate with that, as opposed to in years past, and I think even its predecessor, and we'll talk about its predecessor a lot, I'm sure. You could get away with a lot of really sloppy approach shots because the putting was a little bit easier, and here I think it's a little bit more of a reasonable challenge. One thing that I'm just chagrined that I noticed so late, but I was wondering, I was like, why is my shot doing this? And I realized that the strike meter that they have, it doesn't properly invert. When you move the target to the top of the ball, you're actually putting more loft on the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody was laughing at me, was like early on in this process, and I'm complaining about how the hell do I get out of this bunker at TPC Boston, and it's because I was telling the thing to literally hit the top of the ball, and I thought I was aiming at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And it's a strike meter that, when you think about it, it mirrors the golf clubs when you're modifying your shot, when you lay the trigger down and then you move the stick, and except the golf club doesn't put a ball on there to disorient you and make you think that's the part of the ball that you're hitting. So they need to work on that. That's just sort of a what kind of thing there, but it's not fatal. It's just, I guess, a question of I don't know that it's not fatal. I don't design video games or develop them. But that's the gameplay. The visuals, while I think presentationally you have something that looks a lot more like a television broadcast, you also have a lot of repetition in some of those scenes. The courses don't get a real showcase of their visual beauty because you have like 3 times a day and no weather change. And then you get to the instance, and I was playing on Xbox One. I don't know what you guys are playing on. There is a lot of course pop-in. Some things just really jar you and take you out of it and make you go, this is what we were waiting for. And I understand that this is a first stab at this game, especially with the new engine, and an engine that was created for a first-person shooter. But that's their problem, not mine. This is not something that I really expected. And as I mentioned in my review, for the quantity of features, sundry and large, that have been left out of this game. You would need a game that was groundbreaking in its gameplay and its visuals to justify their absence. And then you go, okay, well, this is the platform of the future. And yes, Tiger Woods 06 had, or 7 had only 6 courses or whatever. I might have that backwards. And we will see about more stuff coming in the future. But it isn't like that. It's a clean playing game of golf. The thing with the strike meter notwithstanding, love the short game. Love how relevant that the course becomes when they render the whole thing, and now you don't have these weird out-of-bounds scenarios that take you out of your shot, even though it might not land out of bounds. They have to do it that way because they can't render anything beyond a certain point. I think the course plays truer. I think you get truer lies in bad ball situations like the sand traps and roughs and areas around the green and things like that. But absence of features and the absence really of anything compelling in this, next to its siblings, or if you want to call them cousins, from 2 years ago, is just stark, and it's very disappointing. And I'm sitting up here and I'm going, do I want to play Rory McIlroy PGA Tour tonight, or do I want to play Batman? And in the old days, I would be surrendering, large swaths of my time to the Tiger Woods series, but to EA Sports' golf franchise for weeks after release. And you've got 8 courses, 8 real world courses, a career that does not feel like a career at all. Won't even expose you your schedule. Won't even show you what you're playing next. Just feels like one event after another. And I just go, I feel like I've already seen everything this game has to offer.
And therein lies the rub, Ryan Weedeye, is that EA has said there's more coming. Everybody that I've spoken to, whether they like the game or not, wants more of it. Even when producer Ryan Forwarda was on the Press Row podcast this past week, he even said, we wish there was more. And yet there is no communication on what that more is. Brian Weedeye, what is going to happen with this franchise now that it's there and released and is in a state of, I don't want to say limbo, but certainly in one of the more precarious states of any major franchise being released that I can ever remember?
Yeah, I think we all agreed that McIlroy is a decently fun game, but how far that fun extends is really limited by a poor career mode, poor online play, and just the lack of courses and the lack of golfers. So when everyone found out about the information, the 8 courses and the 12 golfers, and then you have some fantasy courses in there also, the question was, how are they going to support this game? Because we have a recent example. We have 2 recent examples, really. NHL 15, which released with a very disappointing features list, and EA came out prior to release and said, okay, here's our plan going forward. Here's all the stuff we're going to be adding in September, in October.
Just prior to release, but yes, prior to release.
Oh, yeah. No, they don't get a lot of credit from me for that, but they did lay out their post-release plans, right? Yes. And then EA Sports UFC, which released and was not received real well in terms of gameplay, and they continued to update that over the months, and then also kind of a lackluster roster, which they added to for 9 months, really. So they do have a track record now of supporting these games post-release, even though they're not going to be necessarily making a bunch of money off of them. They have come out and said, we're going to have post-release content. We're going to have content. Some of it's going to be free. That's all we know. We don't know when it's coming. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what's going to end up being charged for, because inevitably with this series they have to charge for courses. It's a very different situation than UFC and adding fighters who are already under their UFC license. Here they have to pay for any individual golfer they sign. They have to sign them individually. Here they have to build courses and get the license for those courses, not free. They weren't adding, I said this in the last show, they weren't adding arenas to UFC. That's something comparable of that nature that involves a ton of work. So we have to see where we're going to go with this. But as of now, they haven't said anything really specifically that they have to live up to. So no one should be buying the game on the basis of, oh, I'm not worried, they're going to add a bunch of stuff and it's going to be free and then the game's going to be awesome in 6 months. We don't know that. EA doesn't have to live up to that. They haven't made that promise. Ultimately, it will affect, obviously, how the franchise goes forward and consumer trust in them and whether they can launch another game in a few years if that is their plan.
If I'm not mistaken, TPC Scottsdale is like the only downloadable course that they have announced or made a commitment to. And that was the pre-order bonus. And it comes to everybody else in September or something, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing we know, because there is the box on the menus for McIlroy that says TPC Scottsdale coming September 14th, something like that. Yeah. And that's for people who didn't pre-order. But that's it. We don't know anything else about any courses they're planning to add, how much they're going to charge for them, what's going to be free, are they going to improve gameplay, are they going to improve career mode, which is really lackluster, like we've talked about. We don't know. We don't know what they're going to do with it, so we can't really rely on just, well, they've improved these other games. It's really not necessarily a completely comparable situation to those, but I do expect them to support the game. But what is anyone's guess at this point.
And the other thing I'd say there too is this is not like NHL 14 or 15, which was supporting a single game. I mean, this is something that is undated, basically. I mean, how long is this going to be with us? 2 years? 3? So we really need to start hearing their plan for that.
So, and therein again lies the confusion. I don't think anybody, if we knew what the roadmap is, would be as concerned, right? I mean,
well, let me say this, Rich. Like, if EA had some really grand plans for this game coming up, and they're going to add a bunch of free courses or something in August or September, like, they would have said that. They would have said it by now. You would think, logically, they would have said that by now, because they lost a bunch of people at release from buying the game simply because it didn't have a lot of courses. I mean, this was a huge point of contention leading up to release. People saying they weren't going to buy it because of that. People playing on EA Access saying there's just not enough there. I'm not going to buy it. A lot of people passed on it, and maybe they come back down the line if this stuff gets added in. But if they had all these bullets in their gun that for McIlroy in the next month or two, they would have used them by now, I think. You just don't wait. It's just like NHL. Last year, they had that stuff mapped out for people because they said, hey, if you buy the game, we're going to give you this stuff. We want you to buy the game still on day one, but without it, you don't really know where they're going to go right now, and you can't put your trust in just buying the product thinking they're adding that stuff.
All right, so Owen, you mentioned this earlier, right? You would, and we've talked about it on the show, quite a bit in the past. We all have our sort of the games that grab us in particular, right? In years past, it was Tiger Woods. So, what would have to happen for Rory McIlroy to sort of bring you back in a fashion similar to the ways that Tiger Woods did in the years past? Is it simply, Augusta? Is it more courses? Is it more golfers? Is it additional aspects to the existing modes, the career mode and the online mode? Is it new modes? What is it, do you think, or what are those different things that it would take to turn Rory McIlroy into something that would personally appeal to you in the ways that other EA PGA Tour games have in years past?
Well, I think the course variety is really the linchpin to the whole thing here, and unfortunately, that would have to be something that takes time, unless they have all of this stuff, hiding out somewhere, and they've had the license. They've had the license to Pebble Beach going back to like 1997 or something. It's been in every game on the disc, even before the Tiger Woods brand. So it's like, did that deal expire and they just said, okay, the hell with it, we're not the most popular courses in our game again? I mean, I don't know what happened there. But the course variety, and not only that, I mean the courses that they've selected. How many of those courses in there are ones that really like sell a golf game to to video game, to golf fans. I mean, St. Andrews, maybe. I mean, they have Chambers Bay, which is the site of a major this year, but that's the first time it's ever gone up there. There's not Pinehurst, there's not Oakmont, there's not Atlanta Athletic Club or Eastlake, there's not Bethpage Black. There's not a lot of these recognizable places around the country. You got Wolf Creek. You got Whistling Straits. I mean, those are interesting courses, but they're kind of novelties. So what I would say is like, I want a deeper career. I want something that's a little bit more meaningful in the career, but that depends on having more courses. You can live without licensed events. I mean, I don't really care about that, but it's nice to have them when you do. But you also, if you have more courses, then you have more replay in your multiplayer. Then you have more tournaments, online tournaments, and things to do with friends that are online. I mean, let's not forget. I know that people are probably going to roll their eyes. I was a big user of the Country Club feature. I really enjoyed that.
Yes, me too.
And there's a lot of people who did, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was in their telemetry that said, hey, this really isn't worth the infrastructure that we would commit to it, or we'd have to completely rebuild it in this way. I get that. I mean, obviously you're talking about an online feature, or at least a wrapper for a suite of online experiences. But that was something that really kept me involved, and kept me involved with a lot of friends, even if I flatlined or felt like my career at the middle point of that second season had gone kind of meh, because I play 4-round tournaments, by the way. That's where your replay value is really in this. It's not in things like Nightclub. And it's certainly not in things like, you keep coming back to, wetlands. I understand if you're going to build a fantasy course like, Paracel Storm. I understand if you're going to build a fantasy course like Greek Isles from the old series. That's, those things are kind of quirky and oddball. They went out of their way to build a fantasy course that plays like, a real course. And I respect that. I mean, it's an interesting course. It's, got some really interesting long par fours in there. But why do that as opposed to, did they really not get the money, to license, again, some of these other courses that have been familiar in the game, San Antonio or Torrey Pines. So it's just, I think the whole thing breaks down, through the thin course roster, and Brian, as you said earlier, that's when people really started to flee this, and that is going to take something. That's going to be something that takes a lot of time to recover from. Either they have to build those courses, or they have to figure out a way to parcel them out such that they can make some money back on them without alienating people. And they're also just, I'm sure they're huge memory. I'm sure they're a huge memory size. So, it's a long road back, but it's got to start with more courses.
So, Brian Weedeye, as we sort of had the feeling as we got close to release, the Metacritic score for Rory McIlroy is in the low to mid 60s. I believe
63 at the moment, I believe.
64. So not disastrous by any stretch, but also not, not where the series has landed in years past. So with that, as well as with the fact that we are 5 to 6 weeks away from the start of a almost punishingly packed sports game calendar, with no real vision into what may be coming down the line. What are the chances that Rory McIlroy, sort of fades in the distance versus chances for it to sort of kind of make a strong comeback?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, because whether it's the 5 weeks that have like 8 or 9 sports-related titles that release, or beyond that, or prior to that, where there's some other huge releases that aren't sports-related, but it takes people's money, because not everybody just plays sports games. There are decisions being made here.
What? They don't?
I know.
Crazy talk.
No. So there are decisions being made here with money, this or this, this or this. And so, yeah, McIlroy becomes something that maybe people are going to look for Black Friday. Or it almost feels to me like this thing, McIlroy, does this end up in EA Access after 6 months like UFC did? Only McIlroy has a bunch of DLC courses for them to sell to people, and it becomes almost like quasi free to play, like their first attempt almost at a free to play game on the consoles. If it goes to EA Access after 6 months, and then they try to sell a bunch of courses to people, that could be
Killer Instinct Golf.
Yeah, exactly. Basically the same model. So it's going to be tough for them to get any publicity for anything they add. So the whole idea behind what they've done with this game was kind of to try and attract casuals, whether it was the Battlefield course or the nightclub challenge or the different gameplay styles. They wanted to make this game attractive to casuals. Casuals have a very limited sense of when a game is going to be relevant to them. And if you miss them at the beginning, if you miss them when it releases, I think it's near impossible to get those people again. Now, the hardcore people, the people who really love golf or purists for the sport, they may be paying attention. But the casual crowd isn't going to pay attention to your press release on 4 new courses added to Rory McIlroy PGA Tour. It's just not going to work that way. So maybe the only way they do attract that is through EA Access or something down the line, where they bring people in at a lower price.
So, Olga, do you think they're going to have the approach of rewarding the early adopters, or do you think ultimately that this is going to be this is going to be a game that is going to be sort of little bit here, a little bit there, DLC, and really just sort of continue to be an experiment? As as you mentioned before, this is not a numbered annual release. This is a platform to one degree or the other. What approach do you ultimately think is going to be taken here?
Well, they better reward the early adopters. I mean, that would just be atrocious if they, rolled out this at $60 and then, 3 months from now they have a pack of 3 or 4 courses and they expect another 15 of that, from you. I mean, that's not gonna feed the bulldog. I have no idea what their monetization expectations are on this. My hope would be that, again, as this is a non-numbered, sports series, that it's like, okay, this is going to be a platform, and if you bought in, whenever you acquire the physical copy of the game, you will get, all of this class of courses and downloadable content, and then we will still have some premium stuff out there, that, because I recognize that special things do come up, fine. But if they just, lurch anybody who bought this thing day one, I mean, why should anybody do business with anyone like that again? And I don't think that, I really don't think that EA is that blind or self-unaware, to do something like that. I mean, I am not happy with, frankly, but this is with the video game industry in general. Just if anybody's got any kind of a product in development, getting any kind of a forthright answer out of anyone as to what's going into it is just impossible. I mean, look what's going on with Konami right now in Metal Gear, because they're scared out of their mind that they say anything honest about what's going on there, that people will cancel their pre-orders and protest. So, they're waiting for that thing to release in September, and and then March game. They didn't tell us about Augusta until they absolutely had to, because they knew that if they were going to say, hey, that deal's expired, because that didn't sneak up on them. That wasn't some car wreck. They knew if they said straight away that we don't have it, but we're going to have all these other things, people would go, no thanks. They knew that if they said, hey, we've got 12 courses, people said, great, what are they? Well, they're these. And you go, well, I never heard of 4 of those. And they go, well, that's because they're fake. People go, see ya. So, that I'm not happy with, but the overall idea that they're going to come out there and plunder our wallets, I'm going to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt on that. But they had really better throw a bone to the people who went in on this, because those people were the ones who were buying and playing this, in what will probably be remembered as the glory years of this franchise.
Well, as we have seen, it is not easy to rebuild a sports franchise on new console hardware. NBA Live is continuing to be a work in progress. Rory McIlroy PGA Tour is a new game in every single way, built from the ground up. These are complex, difficult things to do. So, unfortunately, I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's probably more difficult than the teams originally thought, and I think we're sort of seeing the results of that. I also think that Rory McIlroy PGA Tour sort of had to come out when it came out. July was traditionally the time where college football came out. That's out now. It couldn't come out in August or September when the FIFA, NHL, Madden, and NBA all come out. So it got put in a very strange place, and we're seeing the unfortunate results of that. That it either wasn't ready or it was ready, but we don't know what the true roadmap is.
Can I mention something here? I mean, they put this series on hiatus on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 for a year, specifically to give their team at EA Tiburon 2 years to build for this generation and not have to build for old hardware simultaneously. They were going to offload that to HB, the folks who made the golf club. Okay, so their plan was you get 2 full years on this generation only to build this golf game. And this is what we came up with. And it's unacceptable to me.
It's hard to argue, and both the critics and the public seem to agree. Rory McIlroy PGA Tour Golf, while there may be aspects of it that are good, overall, there's a lot less there than I think a lot of people were hoping for.